On this episode, we talk with the head of Walk-Bike Nashville. Then we learn about Nashville's new sidewalk law. A doctor discusses obstacles to walking. A cyclist discusses bicycle facilities. Finally, we talk with the head of Walk-Bike Frankfort and one of their members. Stay tuned.
We're talking with Nora Kern, who's Executive Director of Walk-Bike Nashville. What is Walk-Bike Nashville?
So Walk-Bike Nashville is a nonprofit that's dedicated to making Nashville more walkable, bikeable, and livable, and really focused on ensuring everyone has transportation options and can get around safely and efficiently around our city.
What sort of issues have you been working on lately?
Yeah, so we were involved a lot this past year in supporting the sidewalk bill that Councilwoman Henderson sponsored to increase and change our provision of sidewalk requirements across the city. And now we're really going to be focusing in on our major pikes and corridors to make sure that not only are there sidewalks along the pike and along our really major busy streets, but that there's also a way to safely cross the street. What we're seeing a lot of in Nashville is we're a spoke and wheel system, so our city is very sprawled out and we have these really major pikes, and our general plan for the city, Nashville Next, has said that we're going to have a lot of our development along these pikes, and we're going to be using the pikes to have mass transit and really grow our transit system. But the problem is a lot of these pikes either don't have sidewalks or have crosswalks every half mile or more. And so unfortunately we're seeing a lot of our pedestrian crashes, fatalities happening all on these same really major arteries, like this one behind us. So we're really focusing in to make sure that the entire corridor is safe, not just walking along the corridor, but also being able to move freely across the street.
And it's pretty important, particularly with transit, because if you're on the right side with the bus in the morning, you got to cross the street to catch the bus home in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Does that mean we're going to have more frequent signals, or what other alternatives are there to get people across the street?
Yeah, well, we're really promoting a variety of different solutions. I think for some corridors it means more frequent signals. We, like many suburban cities, have a lot of super blocks that are, a mile or more in between signals. Another option we're really pushing for is looking at ways to do safe mid-block crossings. So beyond just painting a crosswalk, can we do a pedestrian island? Can we have hawk signals or pedestrian signals that just come on for people who need to cross the street? And then looking strategically at where the bus stops are. So where are people getting off? Where are they trying to go by foot? Where are the apartment complexes and grocery stores? And how can we make sure that where there's the highest demand to cross the street, there's a way to do so safely?
And are any of these ideas strange, revolutionary things, or are they all things that have been done somewhere before?
They are all things that have been done somewhere else. It's certainly, we have a challenge that a lot of cities have, particularly in the South and our more sprawled areas. We have, these big streets are 7 lanes across and they're built for cars. So it's certainly a challenge in terms of changing the status quo. Sometimes these neighborhoods were built without any sidewalks or with no vision for how people were going to get around without a car. And so it's really a question of retrofitting. But luckily, there's a lot of great stuff happening in the United States and across the world that we can learn from. And because the roads are so wide, there's actually a lot of room to work with. So there's a lot of ways to kind of reconfigure how the street works and make sure it's efficient, and make sure there is a way to kind of cross and have it be a permeable barrier and not kind of just dividing line within the neighborhood.
And your organization come up with ideas or places where someone needs to have a good idea. Who do you have to work with then? Is it the state, the region, the city?
Yeah.
Whose streets are these?
Well, it's a little bit of all of the above. Often our bigger streets, like the one behind us, 8th Avenue, are state routes. And so it certainly makes the process more complicated. It requires the cooperation with the state, the Department of Transportation, requires cooperation with the city, Public Works and Planning departments. It also requires cooperation with multiple council members and a lot of different community stakeholders, businesses along the street, people who live in the area, and people who are using the streets to commute kind of across the region. So there's certainly a lot of stakeholders. We add on to that, bus services, MTA, it becomes a lot of people in the room. But it's really, these are the critical streets that we need to be tackling. And so the challenge is hopefully one that could be overcome.
And Walk-Bike Nashville's been around close to 2 decades now.
Yeah.
You've been out there using the word pedestrian a lot, people walking a lot. Is there change? Are people starting to think a little more about pedestrians when they're planning and building?
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a huge shift within the planning and our public works department. Our mayors over the last couple of years have really started to focus in on ways of getting around besides the car. And so most recently, Mayor Berry has committed $30 million for sidewalks for the second year in a row, which is fantastic and really significantly more than we've ever seen before. So I think there is a groundswell, both within the city, within the government, but also within the community. Nashville, like a lot of cities, has a lot of people moving here. People are coming from New York City, from all these bigger cities, out west and up north, where they didn't have a car or where they were able to walk around frequently. And so I think as a result, there's been a lot of pressure for Nashville to figure out how can we be a city where you can get around some of the time without a car or all of the time. And so I think it's fantastic to kind of see that growth and that change really bring some pressure onto the city to figure out what the next phase of transportation is going to look like.
We're talking with Angie Henderson, who's council member for the 34th District here in Nashville. What has the council done regarding pedestrians lately?
So most recently, in late April, we passed a comprehensive rewrite of our zoning provisions for sidewalks, so our sidewalk requirements. And that was almost a year-long process, engaging stakeholders, the builder community, walkable community advocates, to look at how we could best expand our requirements, but do that intentionally and strategically. So not just saying sidewalks everywhere, but finding a framework that would get us really the sidewalks where we need them. Nashville, like many southern cities that grew post car, the car-oriented development, we sprawled, and so we've had about 5 decades here where we've not really been building sidewalks. So for some of our suburban centers, that's especially challenging. We're kind of having to retrofit suburbia somewhat, and so we're looking at those centers as part of our countywide general plan. We underwent a countywide plan called Nashville Next, to look at how we were going to develop as a city. Additionally, we had a walk and bike strategic plan, and those things kind of came together to give us the framework on which to base this bill.
And you spend the year listening to different constituents and their interests. What sort of concerns did you hear from people?
So I think we had the sidewalks to nowhere concern. Once you start requiring sidewalks for smaller size construction, single and 2-family construction, what will that mean? Nashville in its suburban areas has a lot of ditch. You've kind of got the road and then a ditch and then you have the yard. And so sidewalks are pretty costly in that they have to incorporate stormwater infrastructure in them, and it's even more challenging then to build them kind of incrementally when you're having to incorporate that stormwater infrastructure. So what we did was we established this strategic framework and said, okay, these are the areas in which we want these sidewalks. It's not everywhere. It's on our major and collector streets within a 1/4-mile buffer of our centers. And if in that area you don't already have, as a builder, an immediately adjacent or abutting sidewalk, then you can pay into a fund in lieu of construction. And in that way, from a timeliness standpoint and just from a connectivity standpoint, our city's established we need sidewalks there, certainly, but if they're not otherwise connecting, you have the option as a builder to pay into that fund at a certain cost per linear foot.
Then how will that fund get used then once it's accumulated enough money to actually build some sidewalks?
So we have pedestrian benefit zones And so Nashville has a capital improvements budget that's really our planning document. So that's vetted through our planning department in a partnership with Public Works to see where are our priorities and where are the needs. And so as those funds build, then they will be applied to the most high priority projects of need in that same pedestrian benefit zone.
And when an issue like pedestrian sidewalks comes in front of the council, what do you hear from your constituents, and what do the other council members hear from their constituents? I mean, are pedestrians something that they're concerned about?
Absolutely. I think we as a council recognize that that is a real priority. Safety for folks walking, safety for folks biking. And so from our general community, everyone was very much in support of this policy. And the most questions, and rightly so, came from that builder community. What would this mean for them as they plan a building project? And so, that's to be expected. In the end, this was a very popular bill. I had 39 co-sponsors, and we have a 40-member council. So in the end, as we kind of shared about it, talked about it, and interest in the bill grew with the advocacy community participating. In the end, to have 39 co-sponsors on what most perceived to be as a pretty challenging and contentious bill to kind of rewrite your provision of sidewalk code top to bottom, I think was quite a statement for what our council and our city feels is the importance of pedestrian safety and connectivity, just getting people where they need to go in modes other than in the car.
And the bill passed back in April. When does it go into effect?
It is effective July 1st, so about a week from today. So we are looking forward to that. We are going to be tracking that implementation closely in our development services. That's kind of a place where if you're pulling a permit, getting ready to build, you come in and you interact with our codes department, our zoning administrator. We have GIS mapping for applicability for this. Zoning examiners have been trained on the applicability map and what some of the exceptions are, because you will have your home builders who are thinking, should I build it? Should I pay into the fund? What should I do? So just kind of giving some guidance around what that process would be. And additionally, if folks want to appeal the requirement, they can go to our Board of Zoning Appeals. So we've been working hard to make sure that it's a good implementation, and we passed the bill in late April, and the intervening time has given us time to continue to educate about the bill and to get prepared for its implementation.
We're in Nashville, Tennessee, talking with Stacy Doris, who's a physician with the Vanderbilt Medical Center.
Hello.
Well, as a physician, what sort of problems do you see with your patients related to just not getting enough physical activity?
Yeah, well, here in Nashville and in the South in general, there is a pretty prominent obesity crisis. That's probably one of the main things, and that it's actually kind of physically difficult for people to get out and walk in their communities, and that leads to that issue to some degree. And then I think, in addition to that, we do have some air quality issues as well with the amount of traffic that we have. We have air quality alert days that come early and often here in this hot climate. And so one of the things I think a lot about is if we could get people to, park their car and leave it, walk more, we could reduce that air pollution issue and also increase their physical activity.
How does air pollution affect a person? What part of your body does it affect?
Good question. So I see it mostly in my patients who have asthma. So that's a chronic condition, a long-standing condition that leads to bronchial issues, coughing, shortness of breath, chest constriction, those kind of things. And the air pollution directly affects that sort of ability to breathe and breathe easily.
Okay, so if you're on a day where pollution's not bad, you advise your patients to get out and walk?
I do. I advise them often to get out, get some fresh air, walk around your block, say hi to your neighbors, that kind of thing.
And you mentioned some people find it difficult to do because of the environment. What obstacles are people running into?
Yeah, so what I hear from people in general is that they don't feel like there's a place for them to walk. So they live in this great city. They live in Nashville, Tennessee, an awesome music city, lots of cultural events, and yet they don't physically have a place for them to walk. They don't feel invited to walk on their city streets. It's a lot of traffic. There's frequently no infrastructure in place for them. There's no sidewalk, for example. And they don't necessarily feel safe to get out there on foot, and they definitely don't feel safe to let their children get out there on foot.
What's Nashville doing in the way of sidewalks? Are you seeing more sidewalks than you used to? What's happening there?
Yeah, I think there's been a long-standing buzz about sidewalks here in Nashville. There's been a variety of mayors who've run on the platform that they're going to bring sidewalks finally to Nashville. Our statistics are currently that about a third of our roadways have sidewalks on just one side. So if you can envision that, that's very few sidewalks and very few that actually link together. And so there's a lot of talk about new sidewalk creation, building sidewalks, but it's frankly fairly hard to visualize. We don't actually see the production. It's very slow going, very painstaking work. And so, for someone like me who's very interested in walking and having my patients get out and walk, I'd really like to see, big projects come through this town and really make a difference.
What can be done while you're waiting for the sidewalks to get built? Is there anything, any alternative? Because it looks like might be a while.
It's going to be a while, yes. Well, there is a bill that's in production right now allowing pedestrians to sort of have a sort of designated space or a role in our roadways, and also asking cars to provide that 3 feet distance such as they would for a bicycle. And I think that's a really grand step in the sense that it gives an actual legitimacy, a space for people to be. In addition, I'm working on a project called Walking Districts, which would kind of change the nature of some of our more residential streets to really make them kind of a pedestrian-friendly zone, if you will, almost in the kind of vein of a greenway extender. So it's an open, inviting place. It's an actual place for those neighborhood people to walk.
And people have been out walking, unfortunate enough to get hit by cars. Happens all too often.
Right.
What do we know about who gets hit in Nashville?
Yeah, that's a good question too. So I also run a project looking at those horrible cases where people are actually struck and killed while walking. And Nashville in general is rated very poorly in this regard. Compared to our population, we have a very high pedestrian crash rate. And it's probably, in part the fact that our infrastructure is very haphazard. And so what we seem to know at this moment is that people are hit often, and most drivers say they just didn't see the person. They weren't expecting them to be there. And a big hope that I have is with these kind of legislative changes and with more focus on pedestrian issues, that we actually as a culture start embracing our pedestrians and expecting them, giving them room, slowing down when we see them, and allowing them to walk in a safe fashion.
We're in Nashville talking with John Harkey. What's your involvement with bicycle issues in the city?
I'm involved in a couple of different ways. One is I'm on the advisory committees to the mayor and at the health department. And the other way is I'm a bike commuter. I commute to all of my activities, or most of them, on a bike if they're within 5 to 7 miles of my house. So,
What's Nashville like for a bicyclist trying to get around?
if you ask somebody who's not a bicyclist, they'll say it's too dangerous to bike. But I think that you can work your way. It's very important to choose your routes carefully. And when you do that, you can bike fairly easily. The one thing Nashville has that, say, Memphis doesn't is hills. That's, of course, can be a challenge. But I think Nashville is very bikeable, and it's becoming more so.
What sort of issues have you been discussing on the committees you're on?
Well, I think the biggest issue we talk about is having a bikeways that are protected in order to bring people who are a little bit afraid to getting out on the road onto the road. So having a protected bike lanes in core corridors is what we're talking a lot about. The another issue that has come up is when you put in a bike lane, is that taking away a car lane or not? What's it doing to the traffic patterns? Are cars getting backed up more? And we, so far, we think that the designs have been such that even if we do a road diet and cut a lane out, that the cars are still okay. But protecting the bikes is very important. So,
what sort of streets need a protected bike lane, and what sort of streets can get by without one?
The streets that need them are the arterials and collectors, the ones that have a fairly heavy flow of traffic or higher speed traffic. The ones that can get by without them are residential streets and side streets that the traffic flow is light and slow. So there are a lot of, so the approach to getting people on a bike is to point out where the light flow streets are and to make the arterials more protected, the ones that we want bikes to be able to go down as well.
We're talking with Don Stassberg, who's president of Walk-Bike Frankfort. What is Walk-Bike Frankfort?
Walk-Bike Frankfort is a local advocacy organization founded about 13 years ago by a group of citizens. Originally, it was a group of people that just got together to talk about biking and walking issues. Now we're a 501c3 incorporated and have a small treasury and a board of about 9 people.
And what sort of issues have you been looking at?
One of the important things that we did early on was develop a master plan of possible areas of the city that could be improvement. We had a place over here that needed to be connected over here. We would go look at it, see if we thought it was feasible. So we'd have community hearings, input. Through this whole public process, we would come up with 10 or 20 items and refine them. And then we took it to the City County Planning Commission, and it was adopted by the City County Planning Commission as part of their plan. So many of those things were successful that we recently updated that plan with Phase 2, and it was recently adopted by the City County. And so now we have a whole bunch more projects to work on, and I took you to see some of those projects today.
Yeah. And so the one we saw looked like a new sidewalk, new bridge.
Right.
Why was that important?
That was important for safety reasons because there's a lot of people that live along that narrow street that may want to go walk downtown. And as we saw in the picture, before the new walking bridge was built, you had to walk in a narrow street that cars might be going rather fast to get across that bridge. And it's a great safety improvement to have that footbridge that we took a picture of. And we commend the city for working with us. I want to highly emphasize that the city listens well to us, and we tried to do our homework and not put them in a box by asking them to do things that are either outrageously expensive or not practical to do. We try to find the low-hanging fruit, is what I'm saying.
And one spot we looked at that looks like it might be fairly easy to fix was a bridge right next to the library that one side of it's closed. What's going on there?
Well, there's a landowner that has a building that the city is deemed not in compliance with code, and apparently someone in the city, well, I don't agree with it, but thinks that the facade of the building may be dangerous, so they've blocked off walking in front of the building, and as a consequence, they blocked off that side of the bridge because it leads right into the front of that building.
Why would it be important to have that side of the bridge open and not just the other side?
Why that is important, as you saw, there is an elementary school just around the corner that the older kids may walk home from school, some of them, by themselves, but sometimes it may be a parent and child walking from the school to home, or it might be a teacher wanting to walk to school. So what we are doing is forcing the kids and the parents to walk across a very dangerous intersection in front of City Hall. instead of walking in front of the old rundown building. And I personally think it'd be safer to walk in front of the building than cross that intersection. So we think that will be fixed eventually. That property is in litigation, and it's been in litigation for a long time, but eventually there's going to be something done with that property. It's either going to be fixed up or torn down.
We're talking with Larry Lottis, who's a member of Walk-Bike Frankfort. What interested you in joining the organization?
Well, I'm an avid cyclist, and I usually ride 3 or 4 times a week in Frankfort on my bicycle. And I was interested in the programs they had to add bike paths, walking paths, and connect some of the cities, areas of the city, so that I could ride safely between the different areas.
And you've been seeing any progress on that front?
Yes, I have. There has been some real interest from both the city and maybe even from the state government in some areas to provide us a little better access. We have some areas that we're hoping in the future will be opened up to us to where we can stay off of some of the busy streets and still make it through the subdivisions in a safe manner.
And earlier this morning, we were looking at a shopping center in your neighborhood, big Kroger grocery store. What's it like for the people in the surrounding neighborhoods to try to get there to buy their groceries on foot?
Well, if they want to walk right now, they have to kind of walk through areas of broken rock and kind of make believe paths to get between the different subdivisions to get into the parking lot of that grocery store. There is access along a very high-speed, large highway, but I think most people, rather than walking an extra 10 blocks, are probably going to take and cut through the wooded areas and the impromptu walk paths. And I'd like to see them maybe continue on and make those an improved riding path that's a little safer between the different subdivisions and the supermarket.
Are those sort of local connections important for walkers or cyclists trying to get around?
I think they are, and I think they'll, once they become a little bit more organized and maybe a little bit more legitimate, that more people would start to use them.
What does that mean for the businesses in the shopping center?
Well, I think that it would improve the access of some of those people to use those shopping center stores, rather than maybe if they have to get in a car, they're going to go somewhere else.
Visit us on the internet at www.pedestrians.org.